Got a quorum?
We do. Mike is also online and Val will be online.
Okay.
There's Mike. Val, if that's you with just the name, could you raise your hand and I'll promote you? August, are you still our vice chair?
Yeah.
If you would like to assume.
No, Valerie. Okay, it is 6:02. I'll call the planning and zoning meeting to order. First, we got the minutes from last time, which I think we already had a note that on the third section, Valerie and my name was left off the vote. So as long as that gets corrected. I didn't see anything else.
Well, with those revisions, I would move to approve minutes.
I'll second. All right, all in favor? All right.
One commissioner online. Let's go carries.
Did he raise his hand?
There he is. I think that might be an aye. You can unmute.
Are you there, Mike?
There you
All
go.
right.
Okay. Guess public comment expectations for those people who are online. You can raise your hand for a comment, and if you're doing the phone, I think it's *6 to mute, unmute, and *9 to raise your hand. Anyone who's here in person, you just let the note taker know who your name is so she can write it down. And try to keep your comments to 3 minutes or something reasonable. Is there any public comment for anything not already on the agenda? Where's Mary? All right, new business, zoning amendment, suburban residential district setback caveats.
Okay, you've had an application to amend the sorry, logistics. Mike, is that your phone?
Yes, it's my phone. I'm sorry, I'm having some computer issues and I can't quite get my microphone and my computer operational.
So I think that's working because I haven't. Oh, maybe not.
Yep.
We'll just roll.
So can you hear me?
Yes.
Okay.
All right. So you've got an application to amend the text of the zoning code. This came in from several residents in the Hidden Ridge subdivision, one of the newer subdivisions on the east side of town. The text that they want to revise is the setback requirements of the zone. In all of our other residential zones, there's a caveat that says if you're constructing a relatively small structure, one that's 12 feet in height or less and is 200 square feet in area or less, then you can encroach closer to the rear yard setback. So instead of the 20-foot, it's 5 foot for those structures. The applicants in this case are requesting to apply that caveat in that SR district to the rear yard and also to the 15-foot side yard setback requirement. The application that they submitted is attached, as is the zoning map showing where that SR district is. It's largely on the west side of Rock Creek, some scattered portions on the east side of Rock Creek. And then what is still now a draft chapter of your planning commission bylaws for considering conscientious public engagement. So the decision points that I've laid out for you tonight would be what methods of public involvement are appropriate for the review of this proposed change, and who's responsible for undertaking the methods you select.
Okay.
And Valerie's here now.
Okay.
Other context that I put in the staff report for you is comprehensive plan provisions that I saw as related to this. There may be others that will help you guide your review of this. Also some context about that suburban residential district zone. It wasn't part of the original framework in quite the same way as the other residential zones. What do I mean by that? The original framework set that up as an area where sewer wasn't anticipated. And then in the 90s, when sewer was extended across the creek to that side, they started making some text amendments. They've made a series of those text amendments to make the zoning regulations fit what's possible out there with sewer, a little bit denser development since sewer is out there. So there have been increases to the maximum lots area and balance. Okay, good. Increases to the maximum lot coverage that's possible, decreases to the maximum lot area. And then there was, when we started reformatting the code, we realized that there was a maximum lot size in the SR district, but not a minimum lot size, where every other district has a minimum lot size. So smallest you can divide your property in the R1 is 6,000 square feet. Well, that same language of the SR district said the maximum size was 15,000 square feet if you're on water and sewer. And the Planning Commission reviewed that and said that's clearly not the intent to establish maximum lot size out there. It's not the way they had implemented it in the past. And so they made that text amendment to say this is a minimum lot size, not a maximum. Yeah, and so this is another case that's being brought to you to say that these regulations out here just don't fit the development pattern that we see.
Is there, Val?
There you are. Sorry, I'm
All
late.
right.
I sent you an email like 15 minutes ago telling you I was going to be late. Sorry. I probably didn't see it.
All good.
You
Is it-
ready to take over?
Sure. Is it just Mike and I?
No, Davey's here.
Oh, okay.
You and Mike are the only ones on
Okay.
remote.
Oh, okay. Is everyone there?
Yes.
Oh, wonderful. Okay. So sorry, I'm jumping in late. Where are we?
We just did the approval of the minutes, public comment expectations. There was no additional public comments. Ben just did his zoning amendment information. That's where we're at.
Great.
So to the decision points in that staff report.
Okay.
Well, so if we're moving into discussion on this topic now and consideration of the public involvement, public engagement process on this, I feel that this is certainly something that the neighbors and residents in this district should be informed about and provided a better, more robust opportunity to provide some comment. But I feel like this is also the type of a zoning code change that is relatively minor and reflects changes in the circumstances on the properties themselves, like Ben had just described with the extension of sewer not requiring, no longer needing these lots to be as large to provide for septic fields. That I would propose a modest amount of public engagement on a 1 to 2 month timeline, so that this can be brought back before the Planning Commission with some further input from the public, perhaps consisting of postcards to persons with properties zoned SR and adjacent property owners, and then a mention in the newspaper, either as a press release or a little mini ad, in addition to anything we would put in the legal notices when this went before us for a hearing. But I would say that a modest amount of public engagement, the opportunity for the public neighborhoods to also provide comment would be the best way to look at this zoning change amendment before us.
I would concur with that. I'm reluctant to make decisions on broad sweeping changes like that without being sure that everybody has some input on it. So
Was that Davey?
it looks like a pretty harmless, adjustment, but still, I just don't want to step on anybody.
I would concur that I think we need to do that basic outreach in terms of notifying everyone in those SR districts and potentially those in the adjacent zones. But this is, I don't see this as a major change. I mean, this basically brings it in line with the other residential zones that we have in terms of setbacks. If I'm reading your staff report correctly, Ben, looking at that table and looking at the caveats, I mean, we're just making the SR, we're treating it the same as we are the other residential zones. So I think it is fairly straightforward. Nevertheless, I think we need to notify those folks. And I think, a public hearing, a single public hearing is probably sufficient. Again, if we provide adequate public notice.
Can I inquire the list of people requesting the zoning change? Is this comprehensive, or are there other folks up there that would?
This was all prepared by them. So there was no the staff effort to verify that this list did, except that they submitted their checks with it and got the receipts, or who else was in favor or opposed. This is coming to you fresh as it was submitted for your decisions.
Okay.
Great.
Yeah,
August? I just wondered if was it David that spoke, and is August the only one that didn't weigh in? Okay, it was just waiting to see if he had anything to weigh in on.
Do we have a copy of the Declaration of Protected Covenants, Conditions, Restrictions, and Easements for Hidden Ridge recorded on May 18th of 2007?
Can provide that.
I would like to see that before contemplates changing something.
Mhm.
Well, if that subdivision had more restrictive covenants, the change in the zone wouldn't have any effect.
Right. That's,
But those property owners probably could pursue a revision of covenants too as well.
I'm just wondering if there was something specific about outbuildings,
Mhm.
whether that was
Well-
put into the.
In this case, I don't know how germane those covenants would be to our consideration of adopting a zoning change. If they've got restrictive covenants in their subdivision, that would be more restrictive than our allowance, then their homeowners association has the ability to preclude those developments from occurring. You know, looking out longer term, in 10 years' time, if the city of Stevenson elects to expand the SR zone, you know, consideration of the Hidden Ridge covenants really could be a detriment to consideration for future flexibility in the SR zone. But I think it would be good to take a look at them if they're available. I just don't know how much we should allow them to influence our decision here. But however, with that said, just chiming back in to say that, as Jeff said, it is a fairly minor modification of the zoning code. So maybe the best way to go forward would be to say, I don't know if we can make I can make a motion now to propose a month of additional public information gathering, public input with postcards and a notice in the paper, and then propose a public hearing to hear this in 2 months' time, but not the November meeting, but the December meeting. I don't know if that would be appropriate, if the planning commissioners, fellow planning commissioners would think that would be a good time frame for this type of a limited scope, minor change to the zoning amendments, a month for public input, and then have the public hearing the month after that. I don't know if that seems appropriate. That seems appropriate to me.
And do we even need a motion for something like this when we're just talking about the public process, public involvement process?
I would like one.
Oh, you would?
I
Okay.
know, here's why, is because in that public involvement subcommittee that we went through, there was dissatisfaction with how things were going. And so what I want to see you guys do is engage with these components of this process. So we've got a call to act in the form of an application that's put forward to you, in reviewing whether or not there needs to be additional problem definition, issue definition with this, whether they've defined that issue appropriately enough. If they have, whether we are going out and informing, educating the public on a unidirectional basis, saying that here's a meeting time, come and give thoughts if you have thoughts, or if we're doing something more robust in terms of engagement. So for an issue like this, I don't know exactly what that might look like, but really just kind of start going through those processes, make this a step-by-step thing that you can go through if you are to adopt this into your bylaws, so that you all take ownership of it, that you're making those decisions through a motion, Val, about what the expectation is.
Okay, and
I would
then,
second my proposal.
Yeah, I think that's a reasonable course of action. Again, we've committed ourselves to making sure the public is informed and that they have the information they need to understand the proposal and an opportunity to offer their comments. And again, I think given the fairly straightforward nature of this change, we're not proposing a new use, we're proposing no change in some of the setback requirements. I think it's pretty straightforward. I don't think we want to make it any more complicated than that. So, no, I think Mike's outline of the schedule and asks is reasonable.
Are you one of the applicants on this?
I am. I'm Ann Kazee. Wrong address on there. I live in Stevenson now. It was off our check.
Uh, So Val, the main applicant isn't here, but one of the co-applicants is, if you want to hear directly from them on anything.
Yeah, absolutely. We'd be happy to hear from her.
Alrighty, well, I don't know if you heard, I'm Ann Kazee, new resident at Falcon, on Falcon Court. It's lot 30. We have a 0.43 acre lot. We have no place to put a shed except on our side yard.
Mhm.
Our lot, basically 10 feet behind our home, drops straight down. So the only place we have to put a shed, and we've already purchased a shed, I would guess maybe 60% of the houses out there have sheds that are not compliant with the city of Stevenson zoning right now.
Mhm.
We just, that was how it was. We planned on putting it 5 foot from the home, and we have an area that's 20 feet from the home to the side. Called the city of Stevenson, talked to y'all, and you explained to me that we can't put it within the 15-foot setback. So
Mhm.
we have a shed that we don't have any place to put at this point.
Okay.
I've been on HOA boards for forever. We do not have an HOA in Hidden Ridge.
Okay.
So city sees it not being regulated. And we go by the city zoning laws. So yeah, I mean, the sooner the better. We moved there in August. We can't place our shed because we don't know if it can stay there. And if we can't place it where we planned on putting it, we can't put it anyplace else. There's no place else on the lot to put it. That's kind of one of the things they talked about is if you just look at the plat map, it looks like there's plenty of room, but the topography changes that when you see. And you're talking again about probably at least 60% of the lots that already have sheds or other things that are not within the zoning regulations.
Yeah, I saw, Anne, that there are, I think, 11 folks are signed on requesting the zoning change. I don't know how built out is this development at this point. Ben, is it pretty built out?
It is,
Or
it's a
Ann?
neighborhood.
Yeah, I mean, 90+% at this point,
Okay,
just a few lots left.
great. Did you talk to any other neighbors or homeowners that weren't in favor of this at all?
I haven't talked to anyone that's not in favor of it. The person I know that has complained the most lives directly across the street from me, but she isn't compliant either. I mean,
Okay.
that's with, yeah. Yeah, I mean,
Okay.
she's not, and I guess, I mean, bad on us that we just assumed from looking at the neighborhood that we were fine to buy our $4,500 shed and put it where we thought we could put it. You know, then calling the city, finding out that wasn't the case was a big shocker.
Great. Well, thank you for letting us know that. And I think unless anyone else in the Planning Commission has any questions, I think we could move to Mike's motion. Is Mike, are you on a phone?
I am. I've got a dual thing going on here with two pieces of technology. My computer's microphone isn't working, so I've got the
Okay.
computer
I
video.
just wondered what you were doing. Okay.
Yeah.
Okay.
So,
So does
if
anyone
you'd
else?
like me to restate the motion, I can, but it,
Yeah, I was just checking to see
Val.
if anybody else had any other questions. If not, we can have Mike restate the motion. All right. It's all you, Mike.
okay. All right, thank you. So for the matter of this rezoning, or this change before us, this request to adjust the setbacks in the SR district, I would like to make a motion that we instruct the planning director to prepare postcard notices for residents in the SR, all residents, all property owners in the SR district and adjoining parcel owners, and prepare an informational ad or a public ad or notice to the newspaper of record, informing them of this change or this proposal, so that this can be, that the Planning Commission would hear this in a public hearing in the December 2021 Planning Commission hearing.
That sounds really good.
I'll second.
Okay, do we have a second? Is
Yeah.
that what I heard?
I'll
Okay,
second.
got a second. Okay, so all in favor? Does everybody go around once? Aye. Do we get everybody?
Aye.
All right.
We did.
Everybody, aye.
Okay, great. Motion passes. Anyone against it? That's going to be a big no. All right. Thank you. We can move on. Thank you for coming in, Anne. Appreciate it.
You're welcome.
All right. We're moving on to old business.
Old business, the first thing is the bylaws amendment. And so the amendment that's before you enshrines the process that you just went through about conscientiously determining how to involve the public in any issue that comes before the planning commission. So in this case, it was initiated by members of the public. In other cases, it could be initiated by you. And in each case, you'd be deciding how the public's involved, whether it's unidirectional information out from the planning commission, whether there are efforts for bi-directional communication between members of the public and yourselves, and just how to do that. There are ideas in the form of a menu of options to go through for those ideas with some cost consideration that's built in there. So making a determination about how much it's going to cost to do, say, a series of public workshops, listening sessions, offers you that each time. This amendment can also be used as a communication tool. So as you saw in the last staff report, there's the umbrella of options and showing that it's a nonlinear process. As we learn more, we can always return to a previous step before making any specific decision. All this was presented to you in writing at the last meeting, including the amendments to get the exhibits right. So B1, B2, and B3, they were all listed as B1 in the past. And so it is free to adopt if you choose to adopt it. If there are amendments to be made, we can request those, review those at a future meeting.
Then we had a fairly robust conversation on this at our last meeting, plus sort of a continuing conversation during the committee session. Based on that, I would move that we adopt these amendments to our bylaws.
I would second that.
All right. And just, I know we have a motion on the floor. Go ahead, Mike.
Before we move on this, although I know Ben just mentioned that we could look at changes to this in future meetings. One of the changes I proposed in the last meeting was to adjust the language in the flyer example set slightly to strike the word change from that to propose a more neutral example, because I have reservations about codifying this type of alarmist flyer example into our amendment. That if I could, I don't know if amending the motion is appropriate to just propose changing that language, or if we should visit this at a later time, but I did want to bring that up. I did mention that at the last meeting as well, to change the flyer example to state revising versus change, or, just a minor tweak to that is be what I would propose.
Yeah, I heard you say that at the last one. The way those exhibits are added for 2 and 3, there's language in there that says that as time goes on, it may be revised, refined without amending the bylaws.
Oh, okay.
So we can just learn and add to our portfolio of options. We can learn and add to our portfolio what works for example materials.
Oh, okay, thanks for that clarification. Then I would support the motion on the floor as it is.
Okay, great. I think we had a second, right?
Yes.
Okay, so we'll go around again. All in favor?
Aye.
Aye. Okay, all opposed? Was anybody opposed? I think I heard everybody say aye. Okay, motion passes.
No vote.
Great. All right, moving right along tonight, Ben.
Okay, zoning amendment, increasing residential building capacity. So this is at the subcommittee stage to define the problem. I've been working with Commissioner Breckel, as you all voluntold him to do. And so where we're at is really thinking through what that subcommittee looks like and what questions you all should have answers to before you're acting on change. So Jeff, I'll give it to you.
Oh, thanks, Ben. As you'll see in the memo, I think Ben and I have been having some conversations about, you know, who has a stake in this issue, who is either got information that we need or is looking for some relief. And as you see, we've got quite a list here, and I think we're trying to look at this list, refine this list if possible, but also look for how do we find folks to represent these interests on that subcommittee and still maintain a subcommittee that isn't so large that we can't have a quorum, we can't get enough folks together at a meeting to really be able to progress. So, you know, you can see the list here. We wanted the business community. We've heard repeatedly from the business community that the lack of affordable housing is making it difficult for them to hire employees. We'd like to bring them into that conversation, have them elaborate on what their experiences are so that we have something more tangible than just these casual observations that we've heard. Apartment owners, we have a certain amount of multiple family housing out there now. You know, what's their experience? Do they have waiting lists? Are they turning people away? They have vacancies. Again, help us to gauge the sort of demand or the outlook a little more precisely in terms of multiple family residential. And similarly with rental housing for those houses that we have in the community, they're rentals. You know, how many of those are we looking at as, you know, full-time single family residences in terms of a rental, or is a seasonal housing? We want to look at owner occupied housing. I mean, what are folks thinking about in terms of their own neighborhoods? Realtors, what are they seeing with regard to demand, and how would they characterize that? Developers and builders, we've heard from them periodically about some of the issues that have kept them from constructing multiple family dwellings, more affordable housing, I guess we might refer to that, in terms of, you know, financing and regulatory requirements, et cetera. In financial institutions, again, we heard from a number of the builders that they're having a hard time finding financing to be able to support some of these different types of development out there. And as we look at what we have as an inventory for lands that are zoned out there for a variety of uses, how are those lands being used now? I mean, what's vacant or sort of underutilized out there? If we've got a lot of land that's already zoned for various different types of housing, and that zoning looks sort of commensurate with the demand that we see out there, why aren't those lands being used for that? What's holding up those landowners? Do they have different priorities? You know, clearly, just because you zone land doesn't mean it's going to migrate to that use. So helping us get a clearer picture there. And of course, the city has, I think, that history in terms of what is land utilization out there. We also have the studies that have been done, which are valuable. And I think what we're trying to do is further refine that focus out of those studies, so we have a clearer picture of what the issues are that we're dealing with. And then there's just the community at large in terms of who may be interested in how we resolve this issue. You know, people like Mary Rapar, who comes to us and is very interested in participating in this. So you can kind of get a sense in terms of the interests that we think out there that are going to have some value in our conversations, and certainly can be very key to us. I think what we talked about at the last meeting and that first step in terms of defining what the issue is that we're actually trying to deal with, putting some parameters around it so that we understand what those needs are more clearly and why we're not currently meeting those needs. So I think we'd like some feedback in terms of, and we've left an interest out here. It's a pretty comprehensive list. Is there some you think we should take off? And also some suggestions in terms of who we might look to help us on represent some of these interests. Because our next step then is basically to put together that list and invite folks to participate, outline that process to them in terms of how we would approach that, and that first critical step of defining the housing needs for this community, and how we're not meeting them. It's sort of taking that look and saying, where are we today? Where do we think we need to go? How do we get there? Sort of the overall process here that we want to engage folks in. Thoughts?
Oh, I think the memo is great. A lot of ideas that I would have not necessarily thought of. Are you looking for just comments on the memo specifically, Jeff, or how you go about it? What are you looking for from us?
I think most importantly, since our first step is really to try to put this committee together and find those key people, is what about the interests we have here? Do we have the right interests down? Do we characterize them correctly? Are there folks you think that would be good in the community that we should put on a list of prospective of members? And then any thoughts you might have in terms of that, really that critical first step in terms of defining what the issue is that we're trying to address through this whole review, which is really the adequacy of zoning and helping to meet the housing needs. Because remember, zoning is only a piece of that, of the answer to that issue. We can zone, but we can't guarantee that that's going to result in the housing that we need. So.
Right. Agreed.
To get your mind thinking about this a little bit too, that in creating a list of who to include, you're also creating a list of who to exclude. It may not be intentional, and that's why opening up some more thoughts about what sort of interest groups are being excluded here that you all might really need information from. As an example, I don't know, like have specific thoughts about who would be important for this, but as our parking intern and I went about setting up the parking advisory committee, we wanted to make sure that we had perspective on disability. And so we reached out to the Skamania County Senior Services Director, who also happens to run the transit system. And so we got a disability and a transit-minded person to sit on that parking committee because of the emerging issues with, well, to bring perspective to issues like transit when we're considering parking policies, to bring perspective to issues like ADA as our population ages overall. And so are there interests like that we've missed with this group?
or not. I don't know.
Well, I think the other thing too that we can consider is, do we put out a public notice that says, hey, we're setting up this committee to work on looking at the zoning here and how it helps to meet the housing needs in this community? Here are some of the interests that we think are key to that, and invite folks to self-nominate to this. You know, come in and say, yeah, I'd like to participate, and here's my interest, or here's my knowledge, or here's my expertise or role. And make it a more transparent and open process. That's what we're doing, and that's how we might fill this. So we can solicit that, and we can also, if there are specific folks that we'd like to see consider participating, we can go out and reach them as well. So again, we want it to be open and transparent, but we also need to make sure it's something that we can manage in terms of bringing a group of people and having those good discussions.
Well, I think that's where defining what it is that we're trying to do is important, because if you cast too wide of a net, you get a lot of people who, oh, I thought we were talking about this. I only got involved because I didn't want a nursing home next to my house. You get those kind of dynamics, whereas if you have some specific thing, this is looking at affordable housing as it relates to zoning. And these are the issues involved, and it, kind of clarifies that when you make that public. I agree. I think that would be a great idea, but have it so that the scope of it is much more defined, and you get a more precise response, I guess, is what I'm gauged at.
Well, with this issue before us, we've just adopted a public involvement process that maybe we can apply to considering how we can reach out to these people to be on this committee. I think, well, one, I'd like to thank Jeff for continuing to move forward with this effort. And do we still, I guess, Jeff, I want to ask, do we still have a core group that would serve as the backbone of this subcommittee for increasing residential building capacity, or do we have to start afresh with this?
I don't think we have to start afresh. We have a couple of folks from the prior group that are interested in continuing in those conversations. But we also have a couple of folks that said, no, we were more interested in just how do you put together a public involvement process for these types of issues. So yeah, no, we've got a few, and that's important to the continuity of the process. But I also think, having this committee isn't the extent of the outreach either. I think one of the questions we would pose to these folks is, okay, folks, you're here, you're representing these interests. How do we engage those folks as we go through in terms of looking at what the situation is and what the options are, and airing that out and getting that feedback from them. So again, this is more of a steering committee, I would say, Mike, than anything else.
Okay, well, in this case, I think what might happen just naturally is also characterized as what's called like a snowballing effect of people joining in if their interests wax or wane. Hopefully the snowball can generate enough interest to other people will talk to other people to get involved. Now, so I think some outreach with advertisements to look for people to become involved, asking people to ask other people if they know people would be interested in serving with us on this subcommittee. But I think we shouldn't lose sight of the fact that we may have a decision we should try to make. Maybe we should backcast this to say the increasing residential building capacity subcommittee should be able to deliver, some type of guidance to the Planning Commission in a year and a half's time or 2 years' time. And then try to build an agenda around that set date or vaguely set date into the future as to when we would want to try to have some motion based on these recommendations that would come out of the subcommittee. You know, as I recall, I think we had some movement before us with the studies and the new business to increase residential building capacity before us a year ago. And, you know, I think that some of the concerns about rezoning immediately next to downtown caused us as a planning commission to take a more robust look at increasing public involvement in the process. But I don't think we should, I would be hesitant to see this become kind of an open-ended, no decisions, no recommendations coming out of a subcommittee that may have an open-ended time frame to study this issue. So with this, I think we should look for committee members in the remaining months of 2021 with the hopes of convening again, if this works for you, Jeff, in 2022, with a committee that could maybe deliver recommendations or some guidance, having gone through an expanding scoping process and public outreach to get information and input on this issue, to deliver some answers by the end of 2022. Like Ben mentioned, you know, this list may exclude people. I think that it does. Some of the more important stakeholders that aren't on the list are the potential residents who can't move here because they can't
That's what I was
find
thinking.
residential housing. And also minorities and the workers that may be the ones that need housing that will not have a voice at the table. They may be represented by the business owners, but not them themselves. And I think that's our responsibility to think of the voices that we won't be hearing from the committee members, to think about those less represented people that may benefit from increasing residential building capacity in the city. So I'd say 2 months of outreach to maybe convene in 2022 would be a good way forward on this committee process.
Thanks,
Yeah,
Mike.
I think we need to, you know, clearly define, you know, what this committee is going to do. What's its role and its responsibilities? What's the issue that we're asking them to address? What's the duration? What are the deliverables we're expecting from them? Yeah, you know, if you're going to ask someone to sign up for a committee, you have to ask them, be able to tell them what it is you want from them, and how you'll deal with that. How we'll use that.
You might take
Right.
a best practices approach. I mean, there have been some successful affordable housing things that happened here. Columbia Cascade Housing comes to mind. They might be useful, you know, I don't know if it's applicable, but they might be useful to include how they did it before.
Right, and the only thing I was going to say, guys, is Mike hit it on the head. I'm looking at this list, and it's like, do we ask, you know, maybe someone who owns a local pub or a restaurant here to bring, you know, if you come, please bring an employee or two who are actually experiencing this problem, right? And again, that would be the problem with that group is sometimes it could be hard to do because, you know, they're minimum wage earners. You know, it's hard for them to get off work. It's hard for them to attend meetings like that. And I'm trying to think, those are the folks I would really want to hear from as well, to understand the hardships they're going through, what they'd be looking for in, you know, some type of affordable housing. Because, you know, I might have it in my mind what I think it is, but they might have something completely different from their experiences. And I'm not sure how we can make it convenient to get some folks like that to participate, because I think they're an integral part of that.
You could have a meeting at the lodge. I think half those folks don't live in town, do they?
I mean, a lot of folks it's true. There are a lot of people who are, you know, earning minimum wage or slightly above, and they're commuting, you know, they're commuting from Camas, you know, East Vancouver. I think that's absolutely true. So was that you, Davey? Hold the meeting at the lodge. Well, Jeff, did you get enough feedback at this point, or do you want any more direction from the rest of us?
No, I think we've got
Yeah, let's,
enough to work on. I think we
Okay.
can go back and look at how we might want to set this committee up again, not just membership, but what is that committee going to do? What's its charge going to be? How long?
having.
What are the deliverables?
Having just gone through the public involvement subcommittee where planning commission didn't define that charge. And so that subcommittee was able to self-define that. And there still wasn't full agreement about what that charge was. And so when it came down to producing their final, this is what we're going to deliver, it was hard for them to then agree that that's all that they were going to do and not more. And so I wonder if, as far as my timeline and ensuring that there is a charge and that you all get something from the subcommittee, maybe we can try to convene, we can try to gather potential committee members, convene their first meeting either prior to the December regular planning commission meeting, or the January one. And at whichever planning commission meeting it comes back, there's a draft charge, there's a draft purpose from that subcommittee that they created themselves that the planning commission could review and say, yes, that's it. Does that help the?
Well, I think it does, but I think you want to set some basic parameters you want them to operate within and let them sort of fill in the details. But I think, I mean, we already know that we want some deliverables out here. I think we can work to define what those are. Those questions we'd like them to answer, I think is the key prospect here. And not just in terms of what that deliverable is, but what advice they have in terms of how we also conduct that public outreach, that broader public outreach in accordance with, with our bylaws. So, and those are two separate but very interrelated topics that we need to work together.
This might be a great opportunity for the Planning Commission to put the public engagement process to its first real test and exercise to see how well we can engage the public, both as stakeholders and in the general public, with this. Jeff, I do think you have done a remarkable job with helping to define the issues that will be before the committee once it does begin to talk about the issues. And we have a good backbone from the studies and the issues that were before the city that led to our discussions on this. Maybe the charge of the committee should be no more elaborate than provide recommendations to the planning committee on residential housing capacity in the city of Stevenson in a year's time for the planning commission, or at the end of 2022, to consider. It seems that if we were to task a committee to, just like Ben described, have themselves define the issue and the issues that would be before them, to take what has already been prepared by you, Jeff, and the studies and the research that's already been done, to then have the spring to work on public outreach and defining the issues further, the summer to then go back and bring it back to the public to make sure we're getting the information right and the direction right, to look at some things in the fall. But then I think that it seems like a year would be a good amount of time to try to take a not well-defined issue and see how well we can work it through this public engagement process, and to see what we can deliver. In, again, I would recommend maybe just having them prepare some recommendations and some guidance to the Planning Commission at the end of 2022 would be a good overarching goal for this committee to be tasked with, so that the process can begin.
Sure, and you can start off that generally. I have some reluctance to be quite that general, I think, with them, only because we don't want them to wander around and say, well, what does that really mean? But at the same time, I don't want to pin them in so specifically that they have no flexibility, no way to be creative or really adaptive to to the issues that we're trying to deal with. So there's a balance point there. And I think you're absolutely right. This is a test of those bylaws we adopted tonight in terms of that public engagement process. And I still look, I mean, I don't think we're looking to this subcommittee to run public involvement. I think they're an element in the planning commission's public involvement effort. But other initiatives or actions that we may take that they may recommend to us as an interim step, maybe something that we would talk about as a planning commission and adopt as part of our outreach process.
Yeah,
I like that.
yeah, I agree. Well, is there anything else we need to discuss on this topic? Jeff, or you feel like pretty comfortable with the discussion?
Well, I think we've got some work to do.
Yeah, we
And I
do.
think this conversation has been helpful. It's been helpful. Thank
Good.
you.
You're welcome. Thank you for all the work you've done. And you too, Ben. All right. Are we going to move on to, is it thought of the month? Is that where we're at?
Yep.
Great.
Well, month, I didn't have any community submissions this time and didn't generate any links for you either. So if anyone has thoughts now.
Just a general thought, I'd like to thank Ben for the remarkable work you did in bringing all this public involvement process together in such a cogent form to have it be added to our bylaws. You took a really, I would not want to say messy process, but it was just very all over the place with a lot of discussion, and you pulled it together in a great document that the Planning Commission can use moving forward. So thanks a lot. That would be my thought for the month. It's a great job.
Yeah, thank you.
Agreed.
I would.
All right. Looks like we're downtown parking study.
Downtown parking study, Alex Ralston from the Evans School of Public Policy at UW has nearly finished his time with us. He's doing some remote work to finalize several aspects of the parking study. So ultimately, we'll be giving you a existing conditions report on downtown parking. That existing conditions report will have 5 chapters, I believe. One is a description of the current downtown parking inventory. This is an inventory of all the on-street parking in the downtown area. It is an inventory of all the private off-street parking that's associated with commercial development there. Anything that's purely residential is excluded from that inventory. So we don't have a full census of parking spaces downtown, but we've got enough to really know. So description of the inventory, characterization of how that supply is used. So the demand for the inventory that's been supplied. That was collected by a dozen or so volunteers over the course of 2 days. Another chapter is that gap analysis showing us where on-street parking might be added. And when we identify what might be added, the intent is to turn that over to the city's transportation consultants right now for estimating what the cost of adding those spaces would be. So we know what the supply is, we know how it's being used, we can make determinations on whether additional supply is necessary, and if it is, where it's possible and how to prioritize adding those in that area. Description of the public involvement process that was a part of that. And several other helpful things. So Alex went through all the minutes from from city council and planning commission meetings over the last 2 years and identified wherever parking was discussed. So that's all in there in one place. All of the city's parking policies and standards through the municipal code and the public works engineering standards will be in one place that you can just flip to and identify as part of this existing conditions report. The assessment of usage should be noted. It's point in time data for 2 days in September, two random days in September. The intent is to replicate this during other seasons, during high and low seasons, to get a better picture of what that demand looks like. It was incredible to see the volunteers collect to go out there and walk through the sun and the very wet rain on the Saturday study. And so now we have that group who's trained about how to do it. And so they'll hopefully volunteer their time to do it again when we need it. But it's been a really great process. Alex was a super to work with and collaborate with on this. So he did a great job.
I thought you were gonna bring him in here. Is he
Yeah,
afraid?
he's already up in Seattle and
Okay.
working toward bringing him into the city council meeting to when he has more of a final report to close out and present. So this one is too quick to turn around, but yeah, it's unfortunate didn't get him in here.
So when do you think that report will be done?
The goal is this month.
Oh, so it would be what,
Oh.
the November council meeting?
Yeah, he'll be presenting the preliminary work in October city council meeting
Okay.
and bring it back to you all for identification or to go through it. So it's a great one.
Very good.
Shoreline management gave you the update last time that the wheels are in motion. They are still in motion and just expecting Department of Ecology to weigh in and provide their list of required and recommended changes next. That's the list of required changes we'll have to make. And so those will be presented to you. The list of recommended changes will invite that shoreline advisory committee back to the planning commission, and we'll run through it in that red light, green lights fashion that some of you might remember from the last time we did it. But we'll just list them all up and say any problem with this one, include it, or there might be a problem, let's discuss it more. So try to process through them really quickly and get a recommendation to city council for approval.
Right.
Was there ever any, there was some talk about renaming Cascade?
And that one, the rename would be completely unimpacted by the shoreline management program.
Okay.
So, I don't know where that died. I think staff at one of the,
Oh, it did die?
as far as I know, I haven't heard anybody mention it in a long time, but
Do we have a date on the realignment? What the next step on the realignment?
next step on the realignment is that we need to get our grant agreements between the city and Department of Ecology signed. And so consultants are helping us to prepare that grant agreement right now about what they're going to fund. And so that's all in process. We met with all the property owners adjacent to there and on the north side a couple of weeks back to let them know about the project, anything that they really think needs to be included in our scope of work to study about that. And I thought that was a good meeting with everybody, really kind of ground floor stuff, saying we're starting here. Everybody's involved every step of the way. So once the grant agreement is signed, we'll initiate our public involvement for that project. And there will be probably several tracks going. So the assessment of the environmental conditions underground will be occurring as soon as they can start that, just to bring facts to the issue to say what remediation might be necessary, if any is for the project, whether capping can be done to isolate pollutants in the ground. We don't know. That's requires the additional assessment, so.
So at least a year out.
Yeah, and it'll
Wow.
really pick up through 2022. As we go.
Ben, was this project eligible for some of the county brownfield funds that I saw mention of? I don't know if that was tapped into for any of the environmental assessment costs on the realignment, or if it can be.
It was, the private property on one side used those funds to do actual sampling, phase 1 and phase 2 environmental site assessment. The grant timeline for that meant that they didn't have time to do sampling underneath the Columbia Road itself. But it is able to cover some of this initial consultant cost for developing the scope of work with the state. And so feds are helping us.
Okay, good.
Yeah, but it's an outgrowth of that. What that private property owner learned through that process has informed us to this point. So yes,
Okay.
sort of. Is the answer to your question.
Okay. All right.
Shinnedeer subdivision, the one on the east side of town. Phase 1 is what's constructed out there. That's where houses are going up. Phases 2 through 4 were planned and approved when the original subdivision was approved. Phase 4 is owned by a separate property owner from the developer of phase 1. There was an interim timeline for them of September 21st of this year to submit engineering documents if they're going to go forward. They didn't submit those. They knew that their approval was going to expire by not submitting those. So phase 4 won't happen unless it's reviewed as a future proposal. Phase 2 and 3 is to the north of where the existing homes are, and that connects Lutheran Church up to Pine Street and Terry Street. That's they had an interim deadline to break ground by that September 21st of this year. They got up there and broke ground the day before. Their construction window ends on Halloween, and so any work that they do needs to occur between now and Halloween, or they have to shut it down, button up the project until either March or April. I forget that date, but so I don't know what their timeline and intent are, but they met that first deadline, and so that one is still active. The overall approval was 87 lots, 8 of them, somebody do my math with me, 8 of the 87 have expired. And so that's down to 79, 27 were part of the first phase. And so that leaves us with 52 in that phase 2-3 that they've chosen to combine that as one phase instead of 2 phase now. And so 2 more streets going in, 2 more east-west streets going in, and that connection to Pine and Terry as part of this phase.
So when you say they've broken ground, what does that mean?
They went up there and did some clearing and grubbing. This is current information as of 2 weeks ago when I went to verify. So they did some clearing and grubbing and installed sediment fence. And I haven't gone back up to see what else that they've done in that area. So that met our requirement.
And the next.
And when did, I was going to say, hey, Ben, remind me when, how many years ago was it when Shinnedeer came back in and we relooked
The
at everything.
Let's see.
It wasn't that long ago.
It's been, yes, it wasn't that long ago, so. The original approval occurred in 2007.
Right.
They broke ground in 2008. The housing market crash at
Right.
that time delayed their finish, as it did many across the state. And so the state legislature put a 10-year approval period instead of the 5 years that it would have been without the housing collapse. And so that 2007 approval became 2017. In advance of those deadlines, approached the city council for an extension beyond the 10 years. They received 2 different extensions from the Stevenson City Council. The latest one was either in 2018 or 2019, though.
Okay. I'm just trying to remember, we had someone that came before the planning commission regarding Schneider. It just seems like it wasn't that long ago.
Yeah.
3 or 4 years. I'm just thinking it's, maybe 3 or 4 years ago, but it's amazing how quickly it started to build out is what surprised me.
Yeah.
A lot of houses going up.
Yeah, and it's a neighborhood over there all of a sudden too.
Right. All right.
That's all I have
So-
for you.
Oh, okay, great. I apologize to everyone for being late. So are we gonna we'll have a meeting in November, Ben?
Yes.
Okay.
Need to check that. Occasionally, is that occasionally a holiday?
I don't think it is this year, but.
I don't think so.
No, November 8th.
Okay, I think we're good. All right. Great. Well, if there isn't anything else, I guess we can adjourn. All right. Good night, everyone.
Right.
Thanks.
Yeah, I heard the bulldozer clanking around.